European powers spent a century ignoring North America. When Christopher Columbus sailed west looking for a trade route to Asia, he basically hit a giant unwanted wall. He didn't find the spices he expected, and initially there was very little gold to justify staying. Fast forward to 1783. The 13 American colonies had finally won their independence from Great Britain, but the new nation was failing fast. The federal government was practically non-existent, and the states were operating as independent, completely broke entities, united only in name. This map shows the harsh geographic reality they were facing. The United States was boxed in against the Atlantic Ocean, a narrow strip of land entirely surrounded by massive, established territories controlled by the British, the French, and the Spanish. On top of being broke and surrounded, the country was experiencing a severe demographic squeeze. The average American family was having 7 children.
Because of this, the total population was doubling roughly every 20 years. All of those new citizens needed a place to live and farm. That relentless pressure pushed settlers further and further west, driving them straight into lands that were either held by indigenous tribes or owned by rival empires. The young United States was outgrowing its own borders before it even had the infrastructure to manage them. To accommodate a population that doubled every few decades, the government had to find a way to secure more land, even while the national treasury remained effectively empty. To survive financially, the country needed to control the Mississippi River to ship goods from the interior to global markets. But that entire trade route was bottlenecking right here, at the singular port of New Orleans, which belonged to France. America sent diplomats to buy the city. Over in Europe, however, Napoleon Bonaparte was preparing to invade Great Britain. He desperately needed quick cash to fund his army, so he offered the Americans a fire sale deal. He would sell them the entire Louisiana territory. This map highlights the transaction. For $15 million, the U.S. bought land that instantly doubled the nation's size. Further south, Mexico struggled to manage its vast northern territories. They invited American settlers into Texas, who moved in so fast they rapidly outnumbered the actual Mexican citizens. Within a few years, those Texans broke free, formed their own independent republic, and successfully petitioned to join the United States. Admitting Texas sparked a bitter border dispute, which directly resulted in a full-scale war with Mexico. The driving force behind that conflict was President James K. Polk. By the end of the war, the U.S. paid Mexico $15 million, and later another $10 million, to essentially force them to surrender the rest of their northern territories. In less than 50 years, through a combination of opportunistic cash deals and targeted military force, the American border shifted from the edge of the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific Ocean. But absorbing that much land that quickly exposed a fatal flaw in the country's foundation. For decades, the northern and southern states had been locked in a bitter political dispute over whether these newly acquired western territories would permit slavery.
The breaking point arrived with the election of Abraham Lincoln. Believing he'd abolish the practice, the southern states seceded to form their own country. The resulting Civil War left hundreds of thousands dead. Ultimately, the North secured victory. 4 million enslaved people were freed, and the states were forcibly reunited under a single federal government. A moment of wonder. You might expect a nation recovering from that level of internal destruction to pause. Instead, the United States immediately returned to its habit of buying land, turning its attention to the massive, freezing Russian territory of Alaska. The Russian Tsar was looking to offload the region. In a late-night negotiation, American diplomats struck a bargain, purchasing the territory for just over $7 million. America had nearly torn itself apart arguing over how to manage its new land. Yet the core instinct survived the war completely intact. If a territory was up for sale, they would find the cash to buy it. By the late 19th century, the North American continent was effectively conquered. The country faced an ideological crossroads: stop expanding or look past the coastline and cross the oceans to build a global empire. The first major test came in the Pacific. American businessmen had seized control of the Hawaiian Islands and were actively begging the U.S. government for annexation. Initially, the president refused, arguing that America shouldn't misuse its power to take advantage of weaker nations. But the geopolitical math forced their hand. Officials realized that if the United States didn't claim the islands, a rival empire, like Germany or Japan, would swoop in and use Hawaii as a military base to threaten the American coast.
so they took control. At the same time, Cuba was fighting a bloody war for independence against Spain. The American public was reading the news daily and sympathized heavily with the revolutionaries trying to overthrow their colonial rulers. Then, an American warship sank in a mysterious explosion in a Cuban harbor. That wreckage provided the perfect justification for the U.S. government to issue a strict ultimatum and shortly after declare war on Spain. The conflict was brief and decisive. American forces quickly captured Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines, decisively ending whatever was left of the old Spanish Empire that Christopher Columbus had set in motion. Following the war, Theodore Roosevelt stepped into the presidency. He brought an aggressive new doctrine, rapidly building out the second-largest navy in the world to dictate global politics. To maintain that two-ocean empire, Roosevelt backed a revolution to create an entirely new independent country, Panama. He did this specifically to secure the rights to carve a canal through the earth, allowing his naval fleet to bypass South America entirely. In just over a century, those 13 broke, fragile colonies completely reversed their geographic trap. They bought, fought, and engineered their way across a continent, arriving on the world stage as an inescapable superpower right as the globe plunged into the First World War.